Everybody, welcome back and thank you for tuning into this video. This time we are going to be starting to work on something a little bit more fun rather than getting our debugging and templates and stuff set up. So this time we are going to go into applying the game animation sample projects, strafing, aiming, and functionality movement. But in this video we're going to try to keep it to strafing because I know I mentioned in the last video that it took about roughly 30 minutes, and I didn't want to make videos that are 30 minutes to an hour because I don't want to take away a lot of y'all's time. I want to kind of get through these videos quick as possible, but I try to be as informative as possible. So in this video what we're going to do is we're going to split up into 3 parts, and we're going to work on the strafing of this character. So as we did in the last video, we set up a UI widget that you could see up in the top right corner, and you can see that as I move around we get stats that change and whatnot. So with the strafing, we are going to be setting up another debugging set line for that that'll show whether we are strafing or using oriental directional movement and stuff like that. So let's go ahead and hop back into it. So within our third person template, what we're going to do is we are going to go into third person and input, and as you can see we already have our input mapping context here, and in our actions we're going to go there, and we're going to, you can right click and do input and then input action to create it. But what I'm going to do is, since we have a jump function here that is a boolean, so when you open it up you can see right here for the value type that it is a boolean. So any, when you do jump, it sets your true false values for any sort of thing that you tie to the jump button that you're using. So since I don't want to go through the input action creation, we're just going to duplicate it here, and we're going to rename this to IA Strafe. So once you got that, and you can open it up and see that we do have a boolean here. We also have our triggers here. So I will say this, normally what I would do is in my input mapping context I would put triggers down for my buttons, but since we already have the pressed released here for our triggers, we don't have to worry about doing it in the input mapping context. So once you see that, got that ready, let's go ahead and hop back into our character blueprint, and call that. So let's go in there in any random space. We're going to call our strafing movement, right? So now, once we have that, what we are going to do is we are going to set up a variable just like in the game animation sample project, and this one is going to be called wants to strafe. So I know y'all have seen it within game animation sample project. If you've looked at it, you have values that say like wants to sprint, wants to strafe, wants to aim, and I am going to go over that with y'all because I know that when you first look at it, it looks confusing the way they have some of the variables set up. So let's go ahead and get into it. So I'm going to go over here to my variables, and I'm going to create a new boolean called wants to strafe, just like that. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to control click and drag and bring it in here, and we are going to then drag off here and call a not boolean. And then once you do that, click and drag off the not boolean, and we are going to do set wants to strafe, or you can alt click and drag from here to do that. So once you got that in place, let's go ahead and attach it to triggered like they do. So now basically what we are going to do here is we are going to compile, save, and in the wants to strafe, we're going to do a couple things. We're going to click on it, go to category, and like I said in one of my previous videos, there are going to be a lot of variables that we will be creating, so we need to make sure that we separate them. So I'm going to label a category called input, and that's where we're going to do a lot of our input actions, where wants to strafe, wants to sprint, stuff like that. And then once you do that, you can see that it's been put in there, and I'm just going to reorder that real quick. And then what we're going to do is we are going to set this to true by default, and there is a reason for that. So right now, it's going to look confusing because you're like, hey Nathan, Silver, why do we want to set that to true, right? Because when you think about it, if we want to strafe and then we get the not bool, then we're setting this to false, right? But then in the game animation sample project, we start off strafing. Yes, but what we're doing is at the moment, we're kind of setting it as is because we technically want to strafe. Having it set to true by default in the variable settings actually is causing us to strafe due to a constant update that we'll be making with a function in just a bit. So since our once the strafe is true at the start, what we're doing here with the not boolean is getting the inverse of that and setting it to false at the moment. And there is a reason why for that, and it's going to also have something to do with the aiming when we get that set up, hopefully in this video. If not, it'll definitely be in the next video. So, and I'll show you as we go along with how this is going, and I also have a comment bubble that we're going to place into this, but I'm not going to place it first in order to not so I don't confuse y'all. So now that we got that set, we're going to compile and we're going to save. So now the next part that we are going to do is we are going to then create a function called update rotation, and where we're going to apply that in our code, and our blueprint is going to be based off of the event tick because we need constant updates to our rotation. So before we start clicking in places here, what we're going to do is we're going to go to the right side here, click new function, and we are going to call this update rotation. Cool. So now what we got to do, and it's going to be very simple. Basically, we need to make a sequence of events, and luckily there's only two sequences. One, basically giving ourselves the ability to strafe and unstrafe, or at least orient to movement. And then the other one is going to involve our rotation rates. So what we are going to do is we are going to drag up here and get a branch node. Oh, I'm sorry, not a branch node. We are going to do a sequence node. The branch node comes next. I confused myself on that. And we're going to scroll out a minute, and then up here, you can either hit B and click, hold B and click, or you can call it in here. And we are going to make the branch node here. So now here is where we want to get the wants to strafe. So we are going to get that and tie it here. So this is the reason why we have it set to true by default, because what we are about to call is the updation to our rotation, or not our rotation, but our strafing and our oriental directional movement. So when you go here into character movement, you're going to find, I believe it is desired, yeah, use controller desired rotation. So basically this is going to be the thing that makes us strafe, because my understanding of it is that when you utilize this, it basically centers your character's view or camera or its body to where you're viewing, or like where your camera is looking at. So, you know, if I were to check this off, compile and save, you don't have to follow this one, but you see if I check that and try to play, oh wait, hang on, so I got to do this too. I need to uncheck this, and I'm going to explain that in just a second too. So now you see how when I uncheck orient to movement, but I have controller desired rotation, I'm strafing left, right, and I'm moonwalking backward, right? So basically what this is doing is it's orienting our character's forward direction to wherever we make our input. So your WASD, up, down, left, right? So, you know, if we go in here, do that, and then go back into it and uncheck it, compile, save. As you can see, we can now go forward, backward, left, right, with our character facing in that direction. So that's what we will be updating here within our strafing. So we're going to click and drag our character movement here, and we're going to drag off of this, and we're going to get set use controller desired rotation. And we're going to put that here. And then what we're going to do is we're going to copy that and put a copy just below it. And then we are going to also get the character movement again. And this time we're going to get set, orient, rotation to movement. Put it there, copy, paste, and now we got two sets. We got two pairs. So we got the use controller desired rotation and orient rotation to movement. So what we want to do, so now kind of going back to it, let me compile and save that real quick. I'm going to go back to it. Where's my event graph? So if we go down, right now, this technically would be saying that we don't want to strafe. And there's a reason why we have that, and it involves the aiming. But we want to set this to true because this update rotation function is what's causing us to do a strafe at the start. So if you notice that in the game animation sample project, when you look at it, the character, nicely animates its strafing movements, stuff like that, but it is strafing at the start. So if you were to uncheck it, the wants to strafe box, you would then proceed to move in whatever direction you are key pressing. So what we're going to do now is we're going to go ahead and connect these, because what we want to do is we want to be able to rotate back and forth between strafing and not strafing when we want to. So here we're going to set true the controller desired rotation and leave that false. And then here, when we don't want to strafe, we're going to turn the strafing part off and then turn on the orient rotation to movement. So right there, we basically have our strafing system set up. One thing I did forget to do is we are going to go back into the input mapping context, and we are going to map that button. And what I've done is I've copied the game animation sample project because I didn't know what other button to give it. So I'm just going to give it my middle mouse button just like they did, because it's just kind of out of the way and whatnot. So let's go ahead and save that and close out of that once we got it. And now what you will see is when we go into play, we should begin strafing. Or are we not strafing? Let me see. Let me double check. Turn it off already. No, we got that. Oh, I know why. Because I didn't connect it. So here's what we're going to do. So let's go ahead and off of here, let's drag our update rotation, put it here, connect that, and now what's going to happen is, see, we start strafing, right? That's what it is. So because what we're doing is we're trying to make sure that we get the proper rotation and movement on every tick, right? So now, like I showed you in the mapping context, is we gave it the middle mouse button. So see how I'm strafing? When I click it, oh, hang on. I don't know why I have to hold it. Why am I holding it? Alright guys, I'm back. I figured out what the issue was. I deeply apologize for that. So what the issue was within our input mapping context. So what I ended up having to do is go into actions and open up our strafe. And we do need to get rid of those triggers. I completely forgot that. I thought it was fine to have the triggers. Well, it technically is fine, but what was happening was the released trigger that we had in there was also affecting it. So I just went ahead and cleared out both of those. And then what I did was I came back into our input mapping context and I just called pressed here. So go ahead and do that. Pause the video, take a second to do that. And then once you do that, come back here and hit play, and like you'll see that you are strafing, and then once you press it, boom, you have the orient to movement. And then if you click it again, you are back to that. So that's what the issue was. And again, I greatly apologize for that. But I'm glad we got that figured out. So then let's go ahead and go back into here, because we do have another thing that we do have to do. So it wasn't due to the not having aiming or anything like that. It was just misunderstanding on my part of the pressed release triggers. So we just want to only have pressed on our thing. So now going back into it, we do have to do one other thing before I end the video here, because I know that little detour took me a little bit off time. So what we are going to do is we're going to do our second sequence here. So actually, real quick before I do that, I am going to copy and paste my comment here for y'all to see, just that way in case y'all want to copy it down for your own notes in regards to this. Or basically, you know, when using IA strafe, player will strafe. When toggled off, player movement will go back to rotating freely via movement inputs, meaning the, you know, orient movement. So let's go ahead, and once you get that down, we're going to come down here and we are going to create another branch node and we're going to connect to it. And what we're going to do here is we're going to check if our character is falling. So we're going to grab our movement component and we're going to click and drag off of it and get the is falling node. And we're going to connect that into here. And there's a reason why we're calling this, and I will show y'all in just a moment. Is basically we're going to be updating our rotation rate while we are in the air and when we are not. So what we're going to do is we're going to get the character movement just a couple more times. And what we're going to do for both of them, well, actually, we didn't have to get them a couple more times. We could have just copied it from here. I'll show you in just a second. But we're going to get the set rotation rate node from our character movement. And we're going to copy that and then paste it. So now we got a pair. And what we're going to modify here, what we're going to modify here is the Z rotation, Z axis rotation. So basically when we are in the Z, our rotation rate will be affected. So what I'm going to do is just like how they had it in the game animation sample project, I'm going to give it 200 and I'm going to show you what that does. So actually let me set it back to 0, right? And let me compile and save. So if I go into play and nothing has been modified, right? We have our rotation rates at 0. So if I'm in the air and moving, as you can see, there's no, actually I gotta make sure I'm rotating the movement. So something is affecting that. Let me see, let me try again. My bad again, guys. Let me double check why this is happening again. Alright, but guys, I'm back. Sorry, I figured it out. It's because I had set the rotation rates to 0 that we couldn't rotate at all. So that was a mistake on my part. I wanted to show y'all real quick before we did that. So what I did was I just cut them out real quick just to show you. So as you can see, our character, when we move around, like how our character rotates, looks kind of smooth when they rotate. And then in the air, you see how we get the quick rotations and stuff like that. So if we come back into here, and let me reset them here. So if we're falling in the air and compared to when we're not, if we are falling, we want to set it to 200, and I'm going to set this to 500, and I'm going to show you why. So in our character movement, if you look for rotation rate, you will see that our default value is 500. So what I want to do is keep the normal kind of like fluid turning rates while we're on the ground, but then what we're doing here is we're technically slowing down our rotation rate. So the higher the number, the faster we'll be rotating. So now that we have that set and we move around, so as you can see, just like in the other what I was just showing y'all a minute ago, we can rotate just fine. But in the air, you see how our rotation's a lot slower when we try to rotate around. We kind of get that, you know, more realistic rotation, because it's not like people can just zip around super quick in the air. So I will say this though, the game animation sample project has this set to -1 for instant rotation, and there is a reason for that, and it involves animations, but we're not quite there yet. That's still like a very long way off before we get there. But what you'll be able to see and notice is how we quickly turn around because of the -1. So basically what it's doing, yeah, see how glitchy and stuff it looks. So that's why I'm keeping it at the 500. But basically they have it set that just due to how their animations are working using motion matching and stuff like that. It is just more convenient for the -1 factor to get quicker rotations and stuff like that. So what I'm going to do is, just to kind of get this wrapping up here real soon, let me kind of throw in the comment here in case y'all want to jot it down for what is going on here. Just, you know, like I said in one of my other videos, just to kind of make sure to always comment, just that way you can always refer back to it later to see what's going on, or maybe to reuse it in some of your other projects, right? So that's pretty much what's going on here. So let me go ahead and compile and save. So pretty much what we did in this video is we set up our strafing action and giving it the not once to strafe, because we're trying to inverse it, and so not once to strafe. So we have this technically set to false. It's just that we are getting the strafing right off the bat due to our update rotation function right here. So regardless of whether we clicked it or not to start off with, we just start off rotating. So if you ever want to just not start off rotating, I would recommend just flipping these. So either that, or what you would do is just turn this off instead. So instead of flipping these, keep them as they are. You're just going to want to turn this off if you ever just want to start the video off or your game off, just orienting your directional movement. So what we're also going to do to just wrap this up is let's make a debugging note for this, just so that way we know what's going on, right? So you should have your UI game HUD open, or if you're restarting up your project, just go ahead and open that real quick. And what we're going to do is we're going to add 2 more text blocks to here. And we're going to call this one rotation. We'll call it rotation mode. Just like that. And then what we are going to do is, let me see, I believe what I called it in mine. The get function, get rotation mode. Okay. So what I did here was I went into my text block and I bound it to a new function, because we're going to be doing that a lot. We're going to be binding to a lot of new functions. Like what we did in the other ones, we're going to get our character reference. We're going to click off of them to get our once to strafe, since we made that a public variable in our character blueprint. And then we're going to right click into here and grab our select node. And we're going to connect this into our index, that way we can get true and false selections. So let's go ahead and make 2 text variables, local variables, because we don't need to call them anywhere else. So basically, just to kind of reiterate with local variables, they're useful only within the function that you want them to remain in. So if you don't have a need to call them publicly, they can just be local variables. That way they're only encapsulated in that function and will only run when that function fires. So kind of more or less kind of optimizes how your game works. That way your public variables aren't sitting there the whole time eating up resources. So what we're going to do is we're going to call one directional and we're going to call the other one strafing. And what we're going to do here is in the directional, we're going to call them what they actually are, so that way you could see what they are in the debugging HUD in our screen. So I'm going to go ahead and get our text, which is the use controller desired rotation for this. So use controller desired rotation. And then for the strafing, what we are going to, oh, I'm sorry, this one I messed up. So this, we're going to remove that and put it into strafing. And then this one is the orient, let me see, it was the orient rotation to movement. Just like that. And then we're going to drag out both of our variables. And if we are strafing, we want that to be true. If we're not, we want the directional to be false. And then you're going to connect that into here. And then you're going to compile, save, and let's go back into our designer, because I did forget that we do need to move that down a peg. So I believe in our last video we just added some padding right here for 20 for X, just to get it out from the left side real quick. And then we're going to move it down 90. And then same with here, we're going to move it down 90, and let's do 200, 250, 280, no, 250 I think was fine. Yeah, 250 is fine. So there we go. So now we've updated our debugging HUD with our rotation mode. So when we do go to play after saving and compiling, you can see right there that we are currently in our strafe, because we're using the controller desired rotation. and then when we click off, we switch to orient, rotation, and movement. So there we go. We got another debugging stat to our UI. So other than that, everybody, it was definitely fun going over this video. I apologize for a bit of the interruptions there. I had to figure out what was going on. But other than that, thank you for joining me in this video. And in the next video, what we are going to go over is the wants to aim. And oh, actually, before I get off, we do need to, I told y'all that I would get, well, actually, I'll put it in later because it's going to involve more stuff with walking and running, but our comment bubble for Strafe. So I'll put that in a little bit later once we get to the walking and sprinting, or at least when we finish the aiming and strafing. So, but other than that, guys, thank you for joining.